My name is Margaret. I am 75 years old. I live in Philadelphia, and I am here today to tell you something the average American woman over 60 does not hear often enough. Listen carefully. A woman who reaches 65 in this country is expected to live to 83, 86, sometimes longer. 20 more years after retirement. And do you know what the average American close to retirement actually has in liquid savings? Less than $100,000. Many have nothing. 43% of women over 65 in this country live close to or below the federal poverty line. And we, the women, live on average 5 to 7 years longer than the men we love. That means we are the ones left with the bills and with the bank statement that does not match the dream we were sold. I am not telling you this to scare you. I am telling you because at 63, I sat in a leather armchair at a bank branch in Center City, and I heard a sentence I will carry until the day I die. And I want, from the bottom of my heart, that you do not need to hear that sentence the way I did. So I am going to ask you something different today. I am not going to ask you to subscribe. I am going to ask you to stay here with me, as if you were sitting at my kitchen table, woman to woman. Stay with me, please. It was a Tuesday morning in the spring of 2014. I was 63, 2 years until retirement. 65, the magic number that for my generation meant freedom. Black coffee in the glass percolator that had belonged to my mother. NPR Morning Edition playing low. Obama in his second term. I thought I was doing just fine. I had worked for 38 years. 38. Do you understand what that means? I started in 1975 at 24 as the first woman on the executive floor of a commercial bank in Center City. The first. I learned to talk less and listen more. I learned to never cry in front of anyone. I married James in 76. We had Susan in 78. I went back to work 6 weeks after she was born. I carried the double burden every woman of my generation knows. The office where I had to prove every day that I deserved to be there. And home where dinner had to be on the table. And nobody asked the man if he had baked the cookies for the bake sale. James died of a heart attack in 1997. He was 47. Susan was 12. I did not cry in front of her. I paid off the house by 2002. I put Susan through college without a loan. I put money into my 401k every month. I thought I was doing everything right. I got dressed carefully. Tailored navy slacks, cream silk blouse, low pumps, and the small pearl earrings James had given me on our 10th anniversary. I looked in the mirror in the front hall and saw a woman who had survived. I called an Uber into Center City. I got out on Walnut Street. Heavy glass door. Green marble facade, PNC Bank in gold letters above the entrance. I walked in, and the air conditioning hit me like a wall of cold reality. The receptionist greeted me by name. She walked me back to a private office, leather armchair, mahogany desk. Through the window, the view of Liberty Place rising into the Pennsylvania sky. His name was Charles Whitman. I will never forget that name. 60-something, silver hair combed back, charcoal suit, navy tie, the kind of formal manner you do not see in young bankers anymore. He stood when I walked in, shook my hand with both of his, asked about Susan, remembered the name. We sat down. I told him I wanted to validate the numbers before retirement. The 401k, the house, the savings. Tell me everything is on track. He smiled. He turned to his computer. He typed for a few minutes. The smile slowly faded. He took off his reading glasses. He folded his hands on the desk. And then he turned the monitor toward me very slowly, and he said, in a voice so quiet and so kind that it cut deeper than any shout ever could, "Margaret, with respect, I have known you for many years, and that is why I am going to be honest with you. In liquid retirement dollars, you have 0. Everything you own is illiquid. The house, beautiful as it is, will not sell next week, and even if it did, you would still need somewhere to live. Your 401k is roughly 80% concentrated in the stock of your own employer, which you never rebalanced. And there is $52,000 in personal loans you made to family over the years, loans that were never repaid and never will be. Your net worth on paper is real, but your retirement liquidity, Margaret, is 0. 0. I heard the word, and I felt my hands go cold inside the warm office. He kept talking, rebalancing out of the company's stock, fixed income, a Roth conversion, delaying retirement 2 more years. And I was nodding. I was nodding the way a woman of my generation has been trained to nod her entire life. The polite nod, the composed nod, the nod that says, I am listening, I am in control. But inside that nod, inside that leather armchair, I had gone completely still, the silent still, the still of a woman who for 38 years had believed she was building something, and who had just been told, in a voice she could not argue with, that the building was a facade. He was still talking, I was nodding, and I could not feel my legs. I do not remember how the meeting ended. I remember him saying, Margaret, we will fix this together. I remember the heavy glass door and stepping out onto Walnut Street into the sound of the city. And then I stopped. Right there, on the corner of Walnut and 16th, in the middle of the lunchtime crowd. People moved around me, the way water moves around a stone in a stream. A scepter bus hissed past. The midday light bounced off the office windows, sharp and white and a little cruel. I stood there, 5 minutes, maybe 10, because I understood, standing on that corner, that every story I had told myself since James died, every quiet pride in the 401k statement, every assumption that the house was wealth and that wealth was the same as freedom, every single one of those stories had been disassembled in 25 minutes by a kind man in a charcoal suit. 38 years of getting up before the sun, 38 years of being the first woman on the floor, 38 years of not crying, and I had 0. Does any of this sound familiar to you? Because I think every woman of my generation has, somewhere inside her, a version of that moment on the corner. I started walking eventually, just walking, down Walnut, across Broad, past City Hall, and after a few blocks I found myself in front of a small stationery store, brass bell over the door, fountain pens in the window. I do not know why I went in. I just needed somewhere to be that was not a sidewalk. The smell hit me first. Paper, new notebooks, ink. A young man behind the counter nodded and went back to his paperback, and I walked the aisles slowly. And I stopped in the third aisle, in front of a display of paper desk calendars, the small kind, A6, spiral bound, 1 page per day, $4.99. I do not know why I reached for it. There was no plan, just a woman of 63 picking up a $4.99 calendar because her hands needed something to hold. I paid, and on the walk back a thought started to form. Margaret, you have spent 38 years moving fast. Maybe the answer is to stop moving fast. That was all. But that one sentence, my dear, was the beginning of everything. The next morning, Wednesday, I sat at the kitchen table at 6 in the morning. Black coffee, NPR low. The paper calendar open in front of me, a blue Bic pen in my hand, and I made myself a rule. The simplest rule a woman in shock can make for herself. From that day forward, no financial decision over $50 would be made on the same day it occurred to me. Not one. No impulse purchase, no moving money, no donation, no loan, no matter who asked. If the thought occurred to me, I would mark an X on the calendar that day, and only on day 7 would I decide if the thing was really worth it, or if it had been a ghost. I called it the 7-day rule. That first week, I wrote down 5 impulses. A new winter coat on Chestnut Street, a donation to a charity that had called the house, a loan to my brother who had mentioned casually that things were tight, a weekend trip with a colleague, and a new dishwasher to replace the one making a funny noise. I marked an X. I went about my week. I did not buy, I did not call, I did not book. And on day 7, I sat down at the same kitchen table and looked at the list. 4 out of 5 had completely evaporated. The coat looked silly to me now. The charity had a poor rating. My brother had not asked again. The trip, I realized, I did not actually want to take. Only the dishwasher was still on the list, and that one I bought calmly after comparing 3 models, and it cost me $140 less because there was a sale starting Saturday that I would have missed in a hurry. I sat at that kitchen table on day 7 and I started to cry. Not the way I had refused to cry at the bank, a different kind. The kind a woman cries when she finally understands something about herself she has been hiding from for 40 years. Because the problem was never the money. The problem was the speed. I had been moving so fast for so long that I had never given myself 7 days to think about anything. Not the loans to family, not the 401k allocation I had set up in 1990 and never touched again. Not the impulses that had drained over 38 years what should have been a real retirement. The 7-day rule did not make me rich. I became free. In the 12 years since, that rule has overflowed every corner of my life. In 2015, I sold the split-level house, not on impulse. I waited 7 days, then 7 more, then I sat with it for 3 months. I bought a 2-bedroom condo on Spruce Street, paid off, smaller bills, less to maintain. The difference I put into safer investments. I retired at 65 on schedule, with a real cushion under me for the first time. I rebalanced the 401k out of the company stock. I cut, quietly, a friendship with a colleague who had spent years borrowing emotional energy and the occasional dollar that never came back. I said no to a cruise that on day 7 I realized I had only said yes to because I was afraid of being alone. And I said yes on day 7 to a road trip with my best friend Diane to the Outer Banks in 2017, a trip I will treasure for the rest of my days. Diane and I had been friends for 48 years. She was the one I called when James died. She was the one who sat with me on the kitchen floor while I finally let myself cry 2 weeks after the funeral. She knew every story. In 2022, Diane was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. She was 71. 6 months later, she was gone. I do not have the words for that yet, but I will tell you what I almost did. After the funeral, on a Wednesday in November, sitting alone in this same kitchen with the rain coming down on the window, I had a very clear thought. I am going to sell this condo and move to Denver and live in Susan's basement for the rest of my life. 12 years earlier, before the rule, I would have called the realtor that afternoon. I would have started packing by Friday, a decision born 100% from grief, from fear, from the absolute terror of being a 71-year-old woman in a city without her best friend. But I had the rule. I walked over to the kitchen shelf. I took down the calendar for that year. I marked a big X with my blue Bic pen, and I closed it. I called Susan, and I did not mention the thought. I just told her I loved her. The week passed, slowly. On day 5, sitting at this same table, I realized the thought had already changed. It was no longer sell the condo and move to Denver. It was, I am terrified of being alone in this city without Diane. That was the real feeling. And the answer to that feeling was not to sell my home of 7 years and move into my daughter's basement at 71. The answer was to grieve, to call Susan more often, to invite the neighbor from the 3rd floor over for coffee, which I did that Saturday, and which started a friendship that is still in my life today. The 7-day rule did not just save me money in 2014. In 2022, it saved me from the 2nd biggest mistake of my life. And at 71, that mistake would have been the one I could not have come back from. Today, I am 75. On the shelf above my kitchen counter, behind the glass percolator that belonged to my mother, sits the original paper calendar from 2014. Every page is marked. Some have small brown rings on them, from the coffee mug, from the mornings when I sat at this table and made myself wait. I keep it there on purpose, so that every morning when I come downstairs to make my coffee, I see it, and I remember. I remember Charles Whitman in his charcoal suit. I remember the leather armchair, the view of Liberty Place, the word 0 hanging in the air. I remember the corner of Walnut and 16th, the scepter bus, the sirens, the light. I remember the brass bell over the door of the stationery store and the smell of paper. And I remember Diane, always Diane. I am not here today to tell you that money is the answer to anything. It is not. I am a 75-year-old woman in a condo in Philadelphia, and I am telling you the simplest thing I have ever learned. Time. Time is the antidote to impulse. 7 days, just 7 days. Between the thought and the action, put 7 full sunrises. Whatever it is, the new car the salesman is pressuring you about, the donation the voice on the phone is pushing you toward, the loan the family member is hinting at over Thanksgiving dinner, the big move after the funeral, the grand gesture after the fight, the expensive purchase after the lonely Tuesday. 7 days. Mark an X on a paper calendar, the cheapest you can find at the drugstore. Wait, and on day 7 you will discover, the way I discovered, that 6 out of every 7 thoughts you have were never really yours. They were fear, they were grief, they were loneliness, they were the speed of a life that never let you sit still. And the one thought, the 1 out of 7 that survives the wait, that thought deserves your yes. That is what 38 years on the executive floor never taught me, and what one kind banker and one small calendar finally did. I wish someone had told me this at 40, but nobody told me, so I am telling you. 7 days, that is all. Please.